I love pastors. I want to start with that. We've had a lot of pastors here on the show, and I love, like, just local pastors in other places of the country. I've talked with pastors who are authors, different kinds of even
ex-pastors,
yeah, pastors who are no longer pastors, all kinds of pastors. And I love pastors. I don't know why. Like, I've always felt like maybe just growing up, I'm the guy that went to several different type of churches growing up because my family was in different, my dad grew up in a more conservative congregational church. So that's where I grew up. But then my cousin went to a more biblical church. That's what they're called, Bible church. But then my sister and brother were actually baptized as adults. They were kind of like teenagers, but adults, right? In a more like non-denominational church. So it was me like going to all these different churches, and I always loved each of them, So anyways, all of that to say, I want to talk about a transition you had from one church to the one you're currently at.
Yeah.
And just to say, maybe on this episode, focus a little bit on the challenges maybe that pastors face, because I think, to me, at least it seems like the culture we're in. I mean, pastors are, like the other day we were reading some statistic that says men's ministry, only 10% of churches in America, only 10% have men's ministry.
Okay.
Right? I was, okay, that seems like that's not good. And other things I've learned is that there's a lot of like deconstruction going on, pastors quitting and stuff like that. So it's like, wow, okay, so on one end, there's a little bit of ministry to men, and then the ones that are in ministry maybe like it or not. So, that's just, there's a lot of tension for me in that area. But I feel like part of me appreciates so much the work that pastors do, because growing up, I was kind of like, I'm just going to say like blessed by all the different churches I went to. So I'm like, now it's almost just like taking that into account and saying, wow, I wonder what their lives were like. As a little kid, I never really thought of it, But so anyways, all that to say, you might be speaking to people that maybe they're just like, what is a pastor? Like, what do they do and why do they move? So talk about the challenge of being in a church and then finding another church. Because I know, we were talking before this last week. You even said before being at the church I'm at, I was doing kind of like insurance stuff.
Yeah, I was selling mortgages.
Mortgages, yeah, okay, right. Mortgages.
Helping people buy houses.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's right. So that, I mean, it's almost like, oh, wow. But then you ended up being a pastor.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So anyways, what are some of the challenges you face on the day-to-day that maybe, I don't know, you wish people knew more about, and like people don't understand this?
That's such a great question. So I'll start in saying I didn't ever plan on being a pastor. That wasn't, it wasn't an aspiration of mine. I didn't grow up going to church in one sense. I mean, I think we had gone to church, but I wouldn't call ourselves like a church-going family. What I had found over time, and I've shared this with my parents, is it felt like we would return to church when my parents were having like relational problems, and we'd come back, and it was important to my mom as a way to kind of get their marriage on track. And then as it was good, it'd kind of wean off a little bit. We wouldn't go as often, and then we'd go back. So it was just very infrequent. But we started attending a local church in Colorado Springs when my dad was in Korea for the Army, and we were invited by someone. And as we were there, they invited us to go to a youth retreat over a weekend, which I did not want to go to, but my mom forced me to go. And it's this, in some ways, it's a pretty typical story of the last night of the retreat. There was an opportunity to respond. I felt like I heard God speaking to me. And then I was I think I just became a Christian. Like I didn't have a framework for it, but it felt, I think I'm a Christian now. But when I returned home, my dad had told my sister and I that he was divorcing my mom. And so he was going to move to Texas. And we kind of had I don't know if it was a choice, but we ended up staying in Colorado when the Army moved my dad around to different places. So my journey in Christianity started with Jesus will make your life better. And then the very next day, like my life was the worst it had ever been. So my first real prayer that I can remember was, if this is what it is, you can have it back. Like telling God, like, hey, you can have it back.
Really?
This isn't what I want.
Wow.
But God was really gracious in staying close in the hard times, right? Just the banner of I'm with you. And no matter how much I tried to push God away, it felt like he was even closer as far as it. So that was very odd. I was going to go to the Air Force Academy. So I saw Top Gun when I was 3, and it's the only thing I ever wanted to do with my life. So I didn't have career changes. I just wanted to fly jets. But in my senior year, began to feel like God was telling me I needed to stop doing that and to go be a pastor, which was incredibly hard. That could be another story for another time. But when I finally said, okay, I won't do it, I'll let that dream go, I'll stop this process, I asked my youth pastor, where did you go to do this? Or how does one do it? And he went to a school in Missouri, which trains pastors and missionaries, which is where I went to. And this kind of answers the question, because one of our first chapels at this school, the speaker said, hey, look to your left and look to your right. Neither of those people are going to be here when you graduate.
Oh, wow.
So for the 1,200 people that were here, 2/3 of them will not graduate from the school and will decide that they're not going to be a pastor again. And he said, for all of the ones who did make it to the end, he used some point, it's like 1 in 4 of them won't be a pastor, by the time you reach a certain age point. So I can tell you there's 5 guys that I graduated with who would be my best friends in the whole world. And none of them are pastors but me. Now, not all of it, none of it's negative, right? It's not like there's a bunch of bad stuff that happened.
The reality
that none of them are anymore.
So only you.
Yeah, one of them works as an executive director in like a ministry, which I guess you could kind of say, but another one's a firefighter, another one is a general contractor, he's doing some court processing, another one is a psychiatrist. And they're all really great men and really great fathers, really great husbands, but none of them are pastors. So there's some of that where there's not a lot of people who do this. And even if you're around people who do it, they don't last for very long, or there may be stuff that changes. So I started as a youth pastor in Missouri. I was on staff at that church for 10 years and left that. If you want to talk about what transition's like, I can do that. But there was a year where I wasn't a pastor there, was kind of traveling, speaking, figuring out what am I going to do with my life, which led me to the Crossing here in Costa Mesa. I was on staff there for 5 years. Left there, had no idea what I was doing with my life, started selling mortgages because we loved the city, we loved our home, we loved our neighborhood. Everybody was happy. And so then it was, all right, let's figure it out. And then I became the pastor at Harbor Trinity in October of 2022. And there's a longer process that got us to that. But I have these 2-year points where I wasn't a pastor anymore. So now stepping back into it, I think I've learned my identity isn't that. Like no one calls me Pastor Justin anywhere except at church when they meet me for the first time. And then I'm usually like, hey, it's okay to call me Justin. My kids don't call me that. My wife doesn't call me, like I am Justin everywhere else. And so some of it is, I think, letting that go. But if we get to your question, like what's the part that people don't know? And this is, I think, to your, like, what's burning in your heart question. I don't think people realize how personal it is, pastoring. And even what it means in relation to other people. So the term pastor in general is just someone who cares for and shepherds people, right? So it's a spiritual gift that can be given to anybody. Like you have pastoral giftings in every time that we sat down together because of how you interact with me, how you care for me, how you ask how I'm doing. You have a pastoral gifting. So even if the title pastor isn't your job, God has gifted a lot of people with being able to care for and shepherd people. So then there is a distinction between you do that as a job, right? Or you do it as a vacation. It's an office that you sit in and not like an actual office, but you have this title inside of your church. It's a different thing. And in the United States, in recent history, pastor is not just caring for people. It's also you are an administrator of a small business. You are a teacher and a preacher. You are an executive who leads teams of people and helps to develop teams. And so there's layers that aren't just pastoring. But anytime there's criticism, it's very much like you, pastor, here's the critique of you. And as great as anybody can do, we're all still human beings at the end of it, right? So then I think the hard part for people is where they would feel really passionate about something or would want to write an email, I think they lose sight of the human being on the other side of it. That can be tough sometimes.
Wow.
Is that deep enough to start? I don't know.
Yeah, that's deep. Yeah, I love it. And so being a pastor, I feel like when you're talking about it can be a job, right? That's interesting because anything can be a job, right? And I feel like, like, for example, growing up, you hear this phrase, you know, whatever you do in life, maybe even in movies or like these inspirational motifs that we hear, whatever you do in life, just be the best at it, right? If you're going to be a sweeper, just be the best sweeper. If you're going to sell popsicles, be the best popsicle seller, which, by the way, I've done before, thanks to Millie. Selling popsicles in Santa Ana. That's a story for another time.
Work and feed your family.
Yes. Through that, completely
At
true.
any cost.
Yes.
That's right.
So anyways, we hear this, but what I realize is like in America, everything can be very professional.
Sure.
So take like some like entry level job, you know, like sweeping, like I was saying, you know, like cleaning houses. I mean, there's cleaning houses, which is okay. I mean, it is what it says. You go to a home, clean a home, and then get paid for doing that and then go back, right?
Yeah.
But then
and you need to have experience, do 2 years of experience, know to how to use all the machines. Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, no, it becomes an industry where the more you know it, then you can start like thinking entrepreneurial and say, oh, maybe I can hire other people, teach them how to do this, talk to some clients that will hire me or hire my crew and then send them over, right? So at that point, it's professionalized, right? Like a simple thing like cleaning became a huge industry.
It's not that simple.
No,
because you know how to use chemicals for everything.
But the task is simple. Like in your head, it's like, oh yeah, cleaning, easy, right? I mean, there's dust, and now there isn't. You wipe it off. But we make an industry of it because there's technical sides to it, and there's this chemical versus this chemical. And Millie used to make bombs all the time when cleaning the bathroom.
There you go.
And they say, Millie, you're making a bomb. You know, you can asphyxiate yourself or.
You can't mix those two things.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Okay.
So things like that. But I feel like with pastors, a little bit of the same thing can happen, you know, where now you're in like this industrial complex of what Christianity is and maybe even expectations from a church to, I don't know, I mean, the money, right? The tithings. The other day we were watching a little video meme about a guy that's saying, be our guest. Have you seen that meme? You've seen it? Okay. Right. So, I mean, it portrays, and maybe I'll put it on the video somewhere, but it portrays kind of like the complex industry that Christianity is in America, in a sense. And in the middle of all of that, I mean, there's a guy that cares for people.
Yes.
Right? But you get paid to do that. So what is that like in that transition from, you know, I'm outside of a church where I'm getting paid to be a pastor to, for a season, I'm not. But then you went back to it, you know? So is there a desire to do that? Is there even like, I don't know, challenging, like facing the industry side of it and saying, oh, wow, I mean, there's money behind this, and then there's power structures or whatever it might be.
Sure.
You know?
That's really good too. I think, you know, when you ask about coming into it, there was a point when I was in school where I can remember I had been given all the tools to do the job and I could do it, and God didn't need to be a part of it.
What?
Is that like, does that make sense? Like I can have any text and I can say, here's how you can break it apart. Like writing a sermon's not hard when you learn how to do it, right? Or if you want, here's the way that I want you to write it. It's not hard to do that. It's not hard to look at, here's what the Bible says. It's not hard to craft statements or sentences, or here's all the different blocks you have to work through. And so I think one of the biggest traps really early is what you said, is I could do this job and God didn't have to be a part of it at all.
Yes.
Like he doesn't have to guide me. He doesn't have to lead me. I am still reading the Bible. I am still being like faithful in that way, but God wouldn't ever have to speak to me about it. I could just do it. And so that's part can be really scary if you're not careful. Just realizing it's that easy in one side.
Yeah. I have a friend who is a pastor right now, and he started being the youth pastor, and he was tired. He just like, you know what? I don't want to do nothing with Jesus. I'm done. I'm just going to come and work and teach. But my relationship with God was like,
wow.
Zero.
So continue the job, but without Jesus.
Zero Jesus. And the main pastor came over like, congratulations, what a great job you're doing. Like, he didn't have any idea what I was. Any idea. I was like the lowest. But I was faithful. I was there working, and, you know, so.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. That's hard, right? And I think, we're much more public in everything now, and we're easier access to information. And so I think there are a lot more notices of here's this guy who did bad, and here's this guy who did bad, and here's this guy who did bad. And one of the things that gets missed is just how many people are doing so good and you have no idea who they are, right? Just a good guy who's serving his city, who's loving his church, who's trying to be a good neighbor. You just never know who they are. And so of course we're going to see the biggest people when they make a mistake. It's going to be like, see, that's what I told you. That's everything that's wrong with it. And it doesn't mean that the thing is wrong. It could just be that the person's heart got sideways somewhere. And you can confuse, the preparation you do to put into a weekend message or a Bible study or something. You can confuse that with how you spend time with Jesus. You can confuse the process with spending time with Jesus. And so that's where I've always had to have the filter of like Justin the man, the husband, the father, and then Justin the pastor, and to be really clear that I'm guarding both of those, because otherwise I'm just doing a lot of work for Jesus, but I don't love him anymore.
Wow.
Or I've lost sight of who I'm doing it for because I got caught up in all the other stuff. But there was a period of time where my wife was involved at a women's group that was happening at Rock Harbor called Nurture, right? So it's a bunch of moms get together, they have tables, there's great speakers, they change who makes breakfast. It sounds awesome. And so we had made the decision, so once we were done with the crossing, we were going to go to Rock Harbor because our kids had friends who were there. They were already comfortable with the classes. It was an easy transition. And like you were saying, like, I love the church in general. I don't have a lot of things that I come into it. I just love it. I love pastors. I love preaching. And so I'll usually be good anywhere as long as my family's good. And they were so good there. That was an easy choice. And so I can remember volunteering for one of the Christmas Eve services because they needed help. And I had missed even just serving because I didn't start in this thinking I was going to be a pastor. I just wanted to help churches. So done AV stuff, had helped out in like every part of church that it was. So I had asked a friend of mine who was on staff there, hey, wherever you need me, I can go. I'll do whatever you need me to do. And he's like, man, we just need first impressions people or hosts, right? And so I can remember being at the front door of the Christmas Eve services, just saying hi to people, and just like greeting them and welcoming them to church. And the person who was leading the team.
You were the be our guest.
Yeah.
Service.
No dancing, no really good rhythm there. But one of the people who was leading that service had said to my friend, they're like, hey, this guy, Justin, I think he's got real potential. And he just started laughing, right? Because I have led every team in church. I've done every position. And like, I had just been so involved. And so we had a good laugh about it. And so there was a moment in between the service, they had kind of had this thing. I don't know if it was an illustration in the service or something, but it had created like messes on the floor. I think it's what they gave to kids to help occupy them during the service. And so I can remember finding a person saying, is there a vacuum anywhere? Because I just want to vacuum up before the next group of people comes in. And so I found a vacuum. I started running it between the service. And I can remember as I was vacuuming up all this stuff, I'm selling mortgages. We got a bunch of different stuff going on. And I can just remember thinking like, man, God, this isn't what I signed up for. Like I thought I was going to be doing something else. And God very graciously reminded me that when I said yes to Jesus, I said yes to Jesus. That was it. There wasn't anything else. I had said I would follow Jesus wherever he asked me to go.
Wow.
And so then in that moment, I was being reminded, and that means vacuuming. a
Wow.
church floor or cleaning floors or selling popsicles. It meant that in that moment, and that still had to be good enough. And so I can remember vacuuming going, I don't know what the future is going to hold. I don't know if I'll ever pastor again. But Jesus, you still have my yes.
Wow.
And in my neighborhood and amongst the people I was around, I think I had a chance to be, whether it's better or worse, I don't know. I was a different version of a pastor when I didn't have the title. Because I think people had a chance to see that what I valued and what I was doing and who I wasn't dependent on my job or my position at a church. It was who I am. And so then I think it gave more opportunities that sometimes the pastor title can get in the way for people. Because again, they can dehumanize really easily too. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's deep. And I was thinking, like, there's a book by... I forgot who right now, but it says it's called Start With Why, right? It's a famous author, but I forgot his name right now. Visit us at ChristianPodcast.com and become a subscriber of Christian Podcast Plus.